of all, for being here. It's so exciting to be at an opening and to be coming out of this thing that we've all been living through and moving into the next phase. My name is Rachel Kugelberger, and I work with Residency Unlimited, the organization that oversees the New York City-based artist residency program. And this is Storying, which is an exhibition of the 4 NYC artists: Zachary Fabri, whose work is right here, Elvira Clayton, Damali, Abrams, the glitter priestess behind you all, and Helina Metaferia. And I'm really going to let all of the artists speak to their work. But before that, I just wanted to mention a little bit about the program. The New York City-based program has been around since 2012, and it's focused on New York City-based artists, so they have to live and work in one of the 5 boroughs or multiple boroughs. And it's also important that they're artists who are or have been traditionally underrepresented in the arts. And we're also very interested in artist practices that are about filling in gaps in historical knowledge. So each year there's a call for entries, and we invite a small panel of arts professionals. So Elena Simone and Christopher Mitsue were on the panel along with myself, and selected these 4 amazing artists. So again, thank you for being here. There's some wine outside and some water, and I'm going to let the artists speak to their work. So first up is Zachary Fabri.
Hello, thanks for coming today. We appreciate everyone coming out to the exhibition. I'm not going to go through all the thank yous. I'll just say thank you to RU and Rachel and my cohort. So I guess that's all the thank yous. And thank you, friends, for being here. So I want to, I guess, start my presentation about with this kind of question, or I guess it's kind of a proposition. Can you present research in a formal context, like a gallery space? And is it interesting? And so that's kind of my thinking in terms of my what you see here. This is what I call like research and drawings and these kind of object gestures. And so the works that you see here literally are born out of the research that I've been doing for the past 3 months in RU. And that research it's in service of a video essay that I've been working towards. And the video essay is about a letter that James Baldwin wrote to Angela Davis while she was incarcerated, while she was in prison. And his letter to her is a letter of solidarity and support and love. And so I'm using that letter that he wrote to kind of open a dialogue around prison abolition, and in a very like more of a broad sense. So that is a long-term project that needs a lot of research and a lot of thinking, a lot of trial and error and experimentation and interviewing and working with people and reading and writing. And so this is, I would say, phase 1 of that long journey to end with this video. And so I've kind of built this structure that allows me to have this research time and space in which I can, and I guess I'm also opening up the idea of what is research, right? And research as drawing, research as play, as experimentation, and also, how do I find myself, like how do I factor into this work? How does my own studio practice, my own kind of hand, my own intention, how do I locate that within this longer process? And so, as you see some of these kind of objects here, and I'll kind of like, in conclusion, kind of turn around and point out a few things. A few things that are maybe that speak to embodiment or presence and absence in terms of the objects and how they may refer or signify a person or a presence or a body. And also located here are objects, found objects that also point to ideas of home and the domestic space. And that's important because Baldwin was writing a letter in the south of France in 1970. And while she was in prison, and so there's kind of like these two spaces, these two contexts in which these two people are entangled. And so my thinking in terms of this space was, how do I kind of like conjure that or evoke some of those ideas in a non-literal way, right? That also allows space for the viewer to have ideas and space for the viewer to respond to things that are not so complete and not so closed off in terms of the politics or in terms of the presentation. So that's about it. That's all I have to say for now. Any questions? And Rachel will ask about if we're doing questions at the end.
I think you can wing it. If anyone would like to ask questions now, go for it. Since it's fresh.
So, any questions?
Did you actually find a copy of the letter that he wrote?
I did. I found, through my electronic Google research, I found James Baldwin's typewritten letter that he wrote. And this is such a very good question, because I've been talking to our cohort and Rachel about how much information is too much, or how much information do I present for the viewer, the audience. And his letter became, like, all this is born out of my thinking about this letter. And the letter is the essay, right? It is all the information. It's his letter to Angela Davis. But more than that, his letter also shows his kind of proofreading marks with his hand, that he crosses out certain words, he crosses out certain paragraphs, he writes in the margins, he edits it, and so his own hand is visible on this typewritten letter. And so part of also what I'm thinking about is, or I guess the title of the exhibition is Jimmy's Hand. And I'm thinking about, like, well, if James Baldwin made a drawing, what would it look like, right? And not in a literal sense, but because you see his handwriting on the page, and some of that handwriting I focused on, and I create these like abstract marks, and basically that's me kind of tracing over his hand, and that's me tracing over his hand, dear sister. So that's maybe one way in which I can locate myself, or implicate myself, or acknowledge myself as kind of tracing over his handwriting and his hand or his drawings. That's a long answer to your question. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Do you change things in this space through the exhibition?
Can you speak louder?
Do you change things through the exhibition?
Yes and no. I have been changing things through the installation, and Rachel can speak more about that. And in terms of through the exhibition, I'm not sure what the rules that I've set up. And so I think I'm wanting to leave it as is. And then at the performance, which is the closing day, the closing performances, I might do things in that performance that alter this installation. Yeah. Michelle.
I was wondering if you could talk a little more about, I think you said that you set yourself up to have time to research. Like, and I was wondering, is that what you said? And I was wondering if, I'm interested in how you live life research, make work, all that stuff together. And I'm curious if you have any more you could elaborate on that process for you.
If I understand correctly, this like life work.
Life work, well, you said you set yourself up to be able to research over the next several years, and I'm wondering if that was, if like you're envisioning lots of different types of these installations where you show evidence of your research, or how that works with the real world, you know.
Yeah.
Like, if you have any genius
Yeah. The real world, yeah. So I think I'm always trying to define my life, not in opposition to the real world, but not as a victim of the real world, right? So as much as I'm interested in like structure and rules in terms of how I create and set up my practice, I'm also interested in how do I break those rules. And these are rules that I set up, so I'm always happy to break them. And by breaking those rules, that yields like amazing things that I could never imagine, right? But to answer your question more specifically, I'm not sure, and I think that that's the kind of that keeps me excited about the work, about the practice, like that I'm still figuring it out. And so if I do kind of map out a kind of timeline in a trajectory about like this is a drawing research space that involves reading and writing and drawing and object kind of gestures, and then how does this literally evolve into the next phase? And literally you're witnessing that right now, and your responses are going to feed into how this evolves into the next phase. And I'll say this, one other aspect which is not present is sound. And I do need to make a sound score for that video. And so my thinking now is about like, well, how does all this sound? Or how does sound generate from this research? If that answers your question. Yeah. And Natalie?
Would it be like a photograph? And you were mentioning domestic kind of elements, the photograph, things in the kitchen. This could be like a photograph of Elvira Davis' box and kids as he's writing a letter or something like that. So the actual image is completely washed out, and then it's mysterious object.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good question. And this was maybe like the last addition to the work that Rachel and I were having a conversation about. And actually this object is from the Andrew Freeman poem that I kind of located this object. I used the word located. This object in this building. And it spoke to me, and it was another kind of object that signified that home and domestic space, but also it's empty. There's no image on that space, and so the only image on that space is of like water stains and like mold and water stains, and so there's this aspect of like time and the weather and atmosphere and how that affects an image, or mark making, or even drawing. And I guess I'm always interested in like how a drawing is made and what kind of marks are made. And so, and I love that aspect. I love the fact that there's no photo on it, but there's like an image of these marks, which then I'm kind of curious about mark making and this whole installation and what are marks, and how are they made. And yeah, I guess it's like this, trying to make these connections between these abstract marks and objects from home, and whose image should be there or was there. I like the fact that we don't know, and the viewer has to kind of like maybe project on that.
But it is a space that James Baldwin could have. He is inhabiting at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
Very much so. That's how I feel the space as well.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, and I think I want to keep that, not ghost, but like that presence.
Yeah.
The concept of a presence, or the idea of some kind of embodiment in this
Yeah.
place. Yeah. So that's a great question.
Thank you.
Can you talk about the objects, these objects, so that looks like an antenna and that looks like a stove top?
Yes. So these are mysterious objects and they're not meant to be talked about. No. But I mean, so as I was like trying to figure out what's going to be in the space, I knew I'm going to make some drawings on this paper, and I knew I was going to make some more drawings, maybe on some wood boards, and there's going to be some clothing, there's going to be a chair and a table, and I knew certain things were kind of like set in my head. But as I'm kind of like walking around my studio and walking from the studio to home, walking from home to studio to the installation site, I'm always looking on the ground for found objects, because I like objects that already have a use and objects that already had a function and maybe no longer functioning, and that are thrown away. And so I'm always curious about how do I create new uses, new functions for objects, and recontextualizing them in a different way that someone may not have thought about. And so in terms of this, it's like a stovetop grill, right? That you put the pans on, that in between the gas flame, and I just thought it was a beautiful aesthetic, formal object. And also the stark black lines. I've been thinking about the stark black lines and how that kind of formal language, like stark black lines, and you see that throughout this space. But also, how do I like hide the light switch? It's like, how do I hide the light switch by drawing more attention to it? I don't know if that works or not, but it's like hiding in plain sight, maybe. And so this antenna is an object that I just really like looking at. And it's obviously like a home antenna that you might find on a rooftop. And I think I don't have any like large kind of theoretical reasons why I chose this particular object, other than I really like it's just as a beautiful formal object, the aesthetic of it, and that it also may not be recognizable in this kind of presentation, and also these kind of stark black lines that maybe have a relationship between these squiggles, that grill, and the text on the wall, maybe. And maybe there's like a relationship that starts to happen, or there's like a system of relationships, or like a vocabulary of lines that maybe speak to each other. And maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't happen. But I'm kind of setting up a scenario for these languages to maybe speak. Yeah.
To me, this echoes communication, and this is very much a piece about communication between the both.
That is a lot better than what I said. Yeah. I mean, yes. And I mean, that's just a great way to like summarize like satellite technology or antenna or radio, writing a letter, like the oldest form of talking to someone. So yeah, like that exchange is like the foundation of this installation is his writing his letter to her, and maybe that's like an electronic form. That's a great way to put it in a more concise way. Thank you. Any other questions on any topic? About anything? Doesn't have to be art. Okay!
Work with RU in this 2021 New York-based residency was very much research-based, and I researched the largest auction of enslaved people in U.S. history. It took place in 1859, over a 2-day period, March 2nd and 3rd, over 430 some people, women, children, and men were auctioned off to pay their owner's debt. The money that he made over that 2-day period is equivalent to about $10 million today. And once the auction was over, the people that were sold away gathered around him and gave him all a silver dollar, and then he sailed off to Europe. Again, like Zach said, it is a research-based project, and I just sort of kind of just hit the tip of the iceberg. There's so much information out there around this one event, and even beyond that, through my research, I found out that over the period of an enslaved person's lifetime, they could be sold as much as 7 times, which just sort of blew me away. But what was unique about this auction is that these people who lived on this plantation, it was actually 2 plantations, a rice plantation and a cotton plantation, all owned by the same man. What was unique about this sale is that these people had never been sold. They didn't live under the threats of being auctioned. Where they lived, where they worked, where they were enslaved, their parents had been born and died there, and their grandparents. The butlers were not known to auction off their slaves. So, this piece on the wall here and this piece, this installation piece, are pieces that I created in direct response to my research. And this piece is something that I did in 2018 and also references a group of people being walked to an auction, mostly children. I was very intentional about materials that I used and processes that I used to create this work. The fabric that you see here is Awesomeburg. It was the textile most commonly used to clothe enslaved people. With this piece, it's primarily Awesomeburg, but I wanted to create a different textile with the Awesomeburg. I wanted to flip the fabric that was used to mark and degrade these people and create a new textile. So I used plants and found objects to stain and dye the Awesomeburg to give these people voices. I've included text from some of my research here. For instance, here, this is the first 4 listings in the auction catalog. These are the first people, the first family that went up on the auction block. This is a photocopy of one of the advertisements. The auction was advertised all over the country, really focused in the South. You know, it was advertised in the New Orleans papers, and different papers in the Carolinas, and of course buyers came from all over. And of course I used cotton in the piece because, again, these were cotton and rice plantations that these people worked. I knew early in my research that I wanted to somehow create an auction block, and that's what this piece speaks to. I found out that anything could be the auction block. You know, I always thought it was like this big, huge stage that people would get, and sometimes that is what you would see, but an auction block can be something as simple as a table in a bar, you know, or a wooden box. And so not only is this the auction block, but it's also an altar, if you will, paying homage to the people who went through this trauma. Lots more research to do. I'd like to think that this is the beginning of a series here. And yeah, like I said, I'm looking forward to continuing research and creating more work around this. Any questions?
Did you mention where the auction took place?
Say that again.
Did you mention where the auction took place?
Yes, the auction took place right outside of Savannah. It was actually, at that time, there was a huge racetrack. So the people were shipped by train or boat to the racetrack. and they were kept in the stalls where they keep the horses, so that the buyers who came into town early could come in and examine them and look over the merchandise, if you will. So yeah, it took place at a racetrack that no longer exists now, but right outside of Savannah, Georgia.
So if I understand, the options are things like the merchandise shelf or merchandise.
Say that again?
The shelf, like a merchandise.
Yeah, it does kind of look that way.
So we just have to put it in that place for the buyers to examine it.
It does? Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, an auction block, through my research, I realized it could be anything. You know, I found out that, I mean, deals were made in bars. They were made sometimes, there could be a long march of people where people would march for days or even months. And if food was needed, then they'd sell the person and make some money. If tolls needed to be paid, then they'd sell somebody and make some money. So that the journey could continue.
I'm interested in your use of the plants. You spoke a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more about how you use the plants and the dyes and also the twigs?
The twigs show up a lot in my work. I've been attracted to using elements from nature, specifically twigs, for a long time. And so I think about a week and a half ago, because people, of course, keep asking me that. First of all, let me say I'm attracted to this material and I use it. But then I started asking myself, well, why? I know there's some ancestral memory going on here that I'm not aware of. So I did some research about less than 2 weeks ago, and I came across this spiritual practice that's very prominent in Cuba, but it comes from the Congo, and they use a lot of sticks, and they call them palo, as in Palo Santos, you know, the stick that you burn. So these people, this group of people in the Congo, believe that the spirits of the ancestors live in the sticks that are found in the forest. So I just came across that, and I'm like, I sort of backed up off of it, because I'm like, okay, you know, is that what's going on here? Again, a lot of what I do is intuitive, and I'm a strong believer in ancestral memory. So that's my answer to that question.
How do you actually this kind of recipe?
Yeah, it is. It was like Zachary. On my walks, for a while there, I was really walking to Central Park every day because I lived close enough to walk to Central Park. And so just found objects, rusty objects. I found out that you could stain and dye fabric with rust. And so whatever I found, I would just collect until I felt like I got enough material. And that was one of the ways that I created this new textile, if you will, to create this.
You place the rusty object on the textile?
Well, what you wet the fabric and you wrap it in the and you tie it.
Around the rusty.
Right.
Okay.
So I actually took pictures. It was really kind of weird,
Yeah.
but beautiful at the same time. So I think I'll include those photographs in my work as I continue. But I also, as I move forward with this series, I'm looking for new ways, like maybe batiking, I don't know, but new ways too. And I'm very much interested in using natural. I use turmeric, I use coffee, I use tea to create this different thing also.
Excuse me, okay, so I'm going back to the option block. Why? Because I saw a long YouTube documentary in one town in the southern of the United States, and in that little town they used to have, they have that big thick wood block where they used to sell the slaves. And now there's an issue that black people in this community want to remove it, white people want to keep it.
I just heard
In my
about
head,
it.
as a foreigner, I always thought that there was that specific place, the way like white people want to analyze it, like kind of symbol, like you know what I mean? It's like they say it's a landmark.
I just heard something about that story.
Parallel for us, please.
It's a new story that just came out.
Yes,
It's
yes.
like in the Carolina, can't remember
Yeah,
where, but it's in the
deep
deep south.
Yeah.
And they, so try to help me remember. So it's like a monument almost,
Yeah,
but it was just
exactly.
there and nobody was paying attention to it. It was like history just right there in plain sight. And so actually they auctioned people. This was a site where auctions
Yeah.
took place. So was it like was it like a stage or was it just a
No, in my head, I thought it was a call in America. Like when they were selling to slaves, they would have to get that little wood in every marketplace.
Right.
That's what I thought until you said that it was just like a table or like it makes sense. So
And this is like a new story I just heard about last week. And so it's like this debate, like some people want to get rid of it, like let's destroy this thing, and then some people want to keep it.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of on the side when I heard about it I don't think it should be destroyed because there's something cosmic and spiritual about that. And so that's the issue at hand, is like, let's just burn this down and forget about it, and let's not talk about it. And so there's a lot of memory there, and there's tears there, and no, I'm on the side of keeping, and I understand that a lot of people in the black community in that town want to get rid of that memory. And we can't move forward, and my opinion, we can't heal until we remember the memory and bring it forth. You know, if for no one else but ourselves. So that's sort of my stand on that debate. And I understand both sides of it too. You know.
And also to talk everywhere about this history, because I really like when you mentioned that in Europe, for example, they don't know so much about this, but it has like a very huge impact in terms of like cotton exportation to Europe.
Absolutely. I was just speaking with someone earlier about a lot of people are not familiar with the fact that I used some indigo dyed cotton in this piece, and I didn't dye it myself in indigo, I actually purchased it. But indigo was like the first major crop in the American colonies, and it really drove the slave trade. And that indigo was cultivated by enslaved people, and then it was sent to Europe. You know, this is not like a black story or just an American story. It's a global story. It built the global economy. The circle for me, and I think, you know, in the metaphysical world, it's a symbol of a higher power that symbolizes God. But for me, it also speaks of that never-ending connection that we have to our ancestors.
Have you ever exhibited the objects, the rusted objects? Have you ever presented them as part of an installation?
This is actually the first time that I've used this technique. So, but thank you for that idea, Zach. Definitely. Like I said, when I would wrap and I was waiting for the fabric to transform, I photographed it because it was just a very interesting look. And you could see the fabric like reacting to those found rusty objects. So definitely, and I have them all. So yeah.
So now, it makes me think about what are these objects and what are their shapes?
Yeah, they were interesting, different little, some round things, some square things, some long things, some wide things, some narrow things, anything that I could easily carry back home. Okay, well, Damali, you're on.
the research piece that I've been working on is this piece that's in the center. It's part of a project for Jamaica Flux, which is a public exhibition that's curated by JCAL in Jamaica, Queens. And it's a series of public installations that will be around Jamaica, Queens later this summer. So for this project, I've been collecting oral histories about art and artists in Southeast Queens. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've been collecting oral histories about art and artists in Southeast Queens, and also I've been doing a lot of archival research that predated this project. I had started to look up who were the Native American people in my area, because I always hear people say, in every area of New York, they always say Lenape, and I wanted to know specifically who were the people in my immediate area. And so I started doing that research, and then I started to look into, after I was in the Southeast Queens Biennial a few years ago, I had never really thought about the art history of the area, and then I started to think about the artists who had been there and wanting to know more. So I've been interviewing people over the past year and collecting all of this research, combining that with archival research that I'd done prior, and then over the past year the libraries haven't been open, so I've done most of my research online. And I've printed out documents and printed them on coffee-dyed paper so that there's a feeling of simultaneity that regardless of when in history each story is coming from, I wanted them to feel like they're all happening at the same time. So some of these images were given to me by people who I interviewed, and some of the images were from my own archives, and then some images I got online. And these other two pieces were part of a triptych that I made from the end of 2019 and then through 2020. This was the first piece, and this piece is about learning to love my shadow self, meaning the parts of myself that I would typically hide from or not want anyone to see, or the parts that feel unlovable. And then this piece over here was about learning to love the good parts of myself, because that seems like it should be an easy no-brainer, but at the same time, many of us can't give ourselves props when we do something well, or can't accept compliments, don't know our worth. So this piece was about celebrating the positive aspects of myself. And the visual language that I use that you can see throughout these pieces, these wavy strips of cut paper, come from a series that I started about 5 years ago, a Black Mermaid series, where I started to cut paper into these wavy shapes to indicate water or being underwater. The mythology I've created around my Black Mermaid series is that they live in the space where the ocean and outer space meet, that there are spaces in the depths of the ocean where no human has ever been, and there are spaces in outer space where no human has ever been, and where those two spaces meet, that's where the Black Mermaids live. And there was something else I wanted to say, but I don't remember. Oh yeah, that's it for now. Does anyone have any questions?
Can you talk about the plants that you use here? And I also noticed when I was looking at really close the pocket that you have here with the plants.
Yes, thank you. So I use plant medicine a lot in my work as for their medicinal properties, but also for their metaphysical properties. So there's a lot of white pine here. White pine represents peace. There's a lot of mugwort. Mugwort is a third eye opening herb and also a dream herb. It helps you to have more lucid dreams. It helps you to be able to remember your dreams, and it also often causes prophetic dreams. And what else do I have? There's some hibiscus, chrysanthemum, morning glory. So each one of them is there for different metaphysical and aesthetic. Oh, and the pocket. I just wanted a different way of containing some objects. Like I wanted to include the selenite crystal, and I wasn't sure of a way to adhere it that it would stay, what adhesive to use to make it stick to the fabric. And so I decided to just make a pocket of this using the same material. Thank you.
I'm curious how long you collect all of the individual pieces before you put them together, or is it something where you're collecting, making at the same time?
It's typically cumulative. Like you'll see a lot of the same kinds of paper and fabric repeated throughout different pieces because I often keep the scraps from one project and carry them into the next project. Recently, I threw away a bunch of things that I've been saving for a long time because I wanted to get rid of old energy, but that is typically how I work. And now I have a lot of scraps from this piece that will travel to the next piece. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Oh, this piece, yeah. There'll be a print of this shown at the Coliseum Mall in Jamaica, Queens. Yes.
So maybe it's interesting you extending how that works, because we have an interaction with the company as well, right?
Yes, I mean, it's a minimal, I personally won't really be interacting. I'll do a talk there, but this piece will be shown at the Coliseum Mall in Jamaica, Queens. I'll print of it. I'm gonna try to make a large scale print.
And I was speaking about the works where you're actually collaging in public.
Oh, yes.
How different are those pieces from these?
Oh, very different. Natalie's talking about these live collaging performances that I do where I create a collage in front of an audience and there's music video projected above the piece while I'm working on it. So that's very different because I don't have the same amount of time to think about it and sit with things. It's just happening immediately.
Right. But the process of collaging is also, this is your way of working, you're collaging here as well. You do that is very different.
Right, I'm collage, yes. It's a collage, but it's done differently. I'm sorry? I don't know the history of the mall. Do you?
Just a little bit.
I mean, I did see LL Cool J there once in the 90s. That was very cool.
So the Jamaica Coliseum Mall is in downtown Jamaica, Queens. It was originally a Macy's, so for art.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yes.
But since the 80s, it's been like a real cultural hub for like rap and hip hop and a lot of activity there and a lot of migrant businesses. And so to me, it seems like really important that we work to make sure that
Okay.
there's so much
Okay,
activity
yeah.
there.
Those are the aspects of it that I just take for granted. When you were like the history of it.
Yeah, no, I meant the kind of cultural history.
Oh, yeah.
It's more than the like architecture.
Okay, so yeah, the Coliseum Mall in the 80s and 90s was huge in terms of like I said, I saw LL Cool J there. A lot of hip hop artists would come there to get clothes. It's a place where you could go and get T-shirts printed with airbrushing or heat press, or take photos in those big wicker chairs with the backgrounds behind you. A place where we would like go hang out after school. So it was kind of like a cultural hub in that way, and it's a lot less of a hub now. It's everything's kind of dying down over there, but it used to be very really bustling. A lot of music, a lot of people, a lot of culture there. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your glitter a little bit? You're using glitter, like the shiny.
What do you want to know about it?
What are you thinking in terms of glitter? Is it significant for you in any way? It's like a theme that I see running
Yeah.
across a lot of your work and also in your hair.
Yeah, and yes, I am the glitter priestess, and I love glitter. It's just something that I've always been attracted to, and that, I mean, it has spiritual significance in different practices where different colors of glitter will be used on candles for different intentions and things like that. But for me, it's just something that I've always enjoyed the aesthetic of it. And it's also, okay, thank you, you just reminded me of something else that I wanted to talk about. Also, like growing up, my parents are from Guyana, and so like my mother and my aunts, everything that they would always wear for special occasions and everything at the home would always be shiny and gold and sparkly and sequins. And what I wanted to mention was the material that this is on is a vinyl tablecloth that I bought in Jamaica, Queens. That's something that my mother and my aunts would often use to cover tables, to cover their bureau. And so lately I've been using these as backgrounds for my collages as well. I don't know.
So my name is Helina Metaferia. I work across disciplines. I also work in performance and video. A lot of my work has to do with collaging, assemblage, installation, putting disparate things together and making something new out of them. So for a live performance for Syndicate Project, I was commissioned December 4th, 2020 to do a Zoom performance. So this is an adaptation of that performance. It was performed for a live audience. And I made it to 5-channel installation. It was a 5-part performance, all on Zoom, and in 5 chapters, so to speak. So I kind of look at it as a story unfolding. And it was really a response to the moment, but also a through line to my practice, which amplifies the voices of Black women through story, through action, through life. So I'll walk you through the different chapters. The first chapter is my avatar. There is sound. When you put sound background, you can hear it. There's also subtitles. And I'm calling in Octavia Butler. I'm calling in this Black woman sci-fi author who pretty much laid out in her book Terrible to Soar what I felt was the apocalypse of that moment. Of course, we can't see to this moment we're in now to know that we'll all survive, so it felt very apocalyptic. And I'm thinking about and reflecting on 2020 and strides Black women made, but also the adversities, such as being essential workers, such as needing to uphold the right to vote, but getting oftentimes undercredited and devalued in many aspects of our lives. So I also lead people through meditation, which my talking head does for folks. The second chapter, which I adapted into a laptop installation, is where I was screen sharing and basically making an altar out of my desktop and bringing in all my favorite memes and my favorite video clips. The soundtrack on the headset is Kamala Harris's acceptance speech. And so I'm actually technically collaging in this space. The third chapter with a soundtrack courtesy of my brother DJ K Meta, who is a DJ who I was able to, give him some money so he can survive through the pandemic to make a soundtrack for me. So he made a whole Zoom soundtrack. There is literally hundreds of songs on YouTube that have the word Zoom in it, but we picked like 20 or 30. And then we made a soundtrack, and I did a Zoom movement therapy, so you can join in and release some of the disembodiment that Zoom can do when we are living up here. Chapter 4 is this, I have to press play once in a while, but it's a text conversation between my highest self and, I guess, me, where I get these text messages, and it's telling me to disconnect from the internet and get off my screen. And I think a lot about the attention economy and what it means to constantly be under surveillance capitalism and to be distracted for our attention all the time, and what it means to have autonomy and get out of phone addiction. And then the last chapter is me eating my own face mask, which felt like a big relief, and is some sort of catharsis at the end of the performance. So this body of work, I am thinking it's new, it's experimental. I wanted to do it with you all. This is my first in-person opening since the pandemic that I've attended. excited to do this, but it also feels like our group met on Zoom every week, so it feels like not an ending to Zoom life, but a possibility of something new. And as we know, these technologies will continue to be a part of our lives. But I wanted to do it for this particular show, but I think I want to keep going with this type of work where intimacy can be found, embodiment can be found in one of the most disembodying sites that I've come to understand, which is the internet, which is communication technology, which oftentimes doesn't give me the same feeling as of closeness, but yet in some ways we can communicate more rapidly and internationally and all of those things. So there's the paradox that I'm wrestling with in this work. I'm also thinking about it in the realm of my larger work, my full body of work, and a lot of my practice has to do with, it may all look a little different, but they have to do with conversations, bodies, and some sort of archive. And so these archives in which I'm drawing from are like, these images, stock Zoom images that I can use as virtual backgrounds, that I can play with like the glitch and it not being perfect. Images that I find on Instagram, so there's a wealth of that within the internet, as we all know. And so how can we get our power back from being oversaturated with image and video? And particularly as a Black woman, thinking also about those images of violence that we consume so much when it comes to brutality or hypersexualization or all of these things of Black bodies, and where is there space for something other, and to make choice, essentially. So that's what I'm grappling with this body of work. So I don't know if people have questions or... Okay, if anybody has any questions or anything. Looks like you have a question.
I have an uninformed question.
Okay.
Do you think that you might continue working or interrogating this kind of disembodied virtual platform like Zoom?
Yeah.
Do you think that you will continue to do like another continuation?
Yeah.
Considering how going forward, a lot of workplaces will continue using Zoom, schools will continue using Zoom, and other virtual platforms.
Absolutely, and one thing we did with our residency on my cohort is I led a Zoom sort of meditation or like a way that we could connect as a workshop, and that's something I've been doing. I'm also a professor, so I work a lot with students around the country in different institutions, and I've been facilitating that. I think of myself as a facilitator on some level. With students, we can think about, for lack of a better word, but meditation or contemplation in digital space, and to me it's about reclaiming your power and thinking about the thing that fatigues us can be a source of inspiration or strength. So I love the idea of continuing with either performances or virtual workshops. And then I do physical collages, so I'm thinking about what would this kind of iteration, what would these look like as not just screens, but like a mixture of hand using the hand, like drawing analog, and technology. So like, how would that feel and look? And I work project-based, so this feels like a project, and I work pretty open-ended. I work until I feel like it's done. So this is like the start of something, and I'll continue until it feels like it's told its full story. Thank you.
Can you tell us how your virtual kind of Zoom workshops work, like the meditation aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean just there were folks here that could probably say it better than I, which you'll experience it.
Right.
I can say from my perspective, but it was about leading through somatic. I'm really interested in somatic exercises and the haptic, and just sort of like thinking about how we can transform our bodies through movement and awareness. And so we did some body-based exercises physically, and then we did a Zoom performance essentially collectively, which was a mixture of a writing exercise and some spoken word per se, like a response. And then there were visuals. We all had the same virtual background of a garden, so it felt like we were in garden space. We'll be doing a performance here for our closing, and so I want to think about that with people who come in as a participatory performance, and think about how we can go from this to like more of this, which I think many of us are excited to do again. But to be aware that this will always be here, you know, and some variation of this. Maybe we'll be holograms. I don't know. I watch a lot of Black Mirror, so like this is my like Black Mirror meets Octavia Butler experiment. So yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
What did you think the mascot? The mascot.
Oh, rice paper.
Oh.
Yeah, I wanted something that I knew I could, if I ate, it won't kill me. So yeah. Other questions? Oh yeah.
I mean, I kind of have a couple of questions to comment, but really kind of I can say because we talked a lot about different forms of technology and a lot of digital stories to be able us to be at everyone's work. I was wondering if you speak a little bit about how you feel that technology in general or technologies that can be have changed our relationship to memory or have changed the ways in which we remember or our compulsion to remember. I'm just curious. To speak to that.
I know for me, the residency, I'll speak specifically to the residency, and most of our meetings were home Zoom, you know. And so I was forced to learn some things. Like I don't think, like Zoom, I was forced to learn how to do a virtual studio visit. I'm embarrassed to say, but I didn't know how to do that. And I was forced to learn how to prepare like a presentation online. And that was really a really great thing for me. Another thing that I'll say, yay, technology is my research. I couldn't go to the Library of Congress anymore. I couldn't go to the Historical Society of Philadelphia like I needed to go. But I was able to find a lot of stuff online, you know, and to experience Helina's workshop, performance, workshop, meditation, I'll say yoga. I mean, I was blown away at how relaxed and how I had gone to a different place through that online experience. So I was forced to really, I think technology is a great thing. I'm very old school. I like to read. I like to touch paper. I like to write, you know, the power of simple words. But I think I'm very much open to the marriage of both. And I think it just can empower us. Somebody said we're very fortunate to be alive during this time because everything's right there at our fingertips, you know. And so for me, it's the marriage of both the old and the analog and digital.
Another reason I asked that question is because so much of everyone's work here is about history and kind of shedding a light on stories that we're like us right now. And technology often is kind of like that harbinger of what's here and was in other words, work remembering. And so much stuff that's left out of that transition from the analog to digital. So that's also what I was thinking about. So much of the work that you're doing is kind of like deliberately not. I mean, with the exception of what you're doing here too, but that also kind of stemmed out of a certain process. But you're also referencing constantly the analog, or constantly referencing the things that are not as familiar to us. There's also a lot of things that don't get into the internet or onto the, into the digital realm. And yet, even now, that seems to be the stuff that is kind of obviously the most important. Even though there's so much that's very deliberately neglected. So it's just interesting to think about how so much of it is about memory. The digital, we
But I think about like before GPS, I knew neighborhoods well. I could drive down streets and remember. I just knew the landmarks. There's a different type of cognition I was there. And now I rely so much on apps and other forms to make those connections for me. And I also love my piece like Excel like across from all. There's a great dialogue that I think you guys can all pick up on, and just the way it all plays, because there is something so there's such handwork in the work, and all of the works actually. And I think that it's a great contrast to yes, that my hand is moving and there's a screen recording and I'm moving the mouse, things around, but there is this intermediary that I think a lot of us have grown accustomed to. So when it comes to memory and to your point, those kinds of things, it's like how much do we want the intermediary device to have control, and how much do we want to rely on our brain system to function, to take that on? And I think that's our choice, but I think so oftentimes for speed and for just keeping up with the time, we let go of some of that.
Yeah, I thought that your workshop was the perfect ending because all of our meetings, as people have been saying, were on Zoom. And then in our final meeting, Helina led us through this meditation. I don't remember what the prompts were that you gave us, but there were things about like tuning into our bodies on a different level. Things that we typically would never think about in a professional meeting, where you kind of go numb and just go into like an automatic kind of zombie or robotic mode. And you like brought me, I can speak for myself, you brought me back into my body, and it was an interesting way to connect with each other and the residency. And then to your question about technology and memory, as I was doing the research for this project, that's like a huge project, and it started to take on a number of different forms. I got a grant from Women's Studio Workshop to make a publication because I had all of this research that I was collecting to make a collage, but I knew that a collage couldn't contain, or even a series of collages, couldn't really contain all of the information or express it in all the ways that I wanted to. So I wrote a piece, I published a scroll, which is also interesting because there are 2 scrolls in this exhibition. The scroll is exhibited right now at JCal in Jamaica, Queens, and that exhibit will be up, I think, through August. And I wrote like an A to Z of some of the research that I was collecting. And then I just found out last week that I got a grant from Queens Council on the Arts to make a documentary using the research as well. So because there's so much information, I feel like I have to express it using different technologies and different forms because there are so many different aspects of it that can't be communicated in just one way.